Today we are going to step into the world of dentistry's most controversial showman. Yes, you did hear that right. This is the story of a small-town New Brunswick dentist who promised painless smiles and unforgettable spectacle, and he delivered. He became an obscenely wealthy multimillionaire who, it was said, was better known than the American president. And the famous name of that renegade dentist who forever altered the world of teeth health was Painless Parker. And yes, that was his real name.
You're listening to Backyard History, the hidden stories that happened in your own backyard. The podcast version of the weekly history column running in newspapers across the Maritimes. With your host and author, Andrew McLean.
In 1937, an unfortunate young reporter named Ralph Morton was sent from Halifax to Boston to take charge of the Canadian Press Bureau there. It wasn't a job any reporter wanted. Ralph Morton's new gig was basically to read the newspapers of New England to find any news reports of Maritimers who got into car accidents. Then he was supposed to send these articles onwards towards news outlets in the Maritimes to be published here. Previously, this pretty easy job went to New Englanders, but the Maritime newspapers who were paying them made the mistake of paying these New Englanders by the story, which led to Ian Slanders, who was the editor of the Evening Times Globe in St. John, complaining.
These newspapermen would have us believe that 99% of all New England accident victims were born in either New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, the place of birth depending on whether the unscrupulous scribes were writing stories for New Brunswick or Nova Scotia newspapers.
However, the young reporter Ralph Morton was about to get a big break in his career. Almost as soon as he walked in the door of his new office in Boston, the telephone rang. On the other end of the line was a man whose name was described as being better known than that of the President of the United States, Painless Parker. He told the young reporter that he was in legal trouble, and Ralph Morton began typing away, writing,
Painless Parker, the New Brunswick dentist who made a fortune pulling teeth, is facing the biggest battle of his career, and if he loses, Parker says,
If I lose, I'm ruined. It's the same old story, politics interfering again. But I'll win out like I always have before. I've had to fight since I started practicing dentistry, and I won't take a licking.
The stocky New Brunswicker cried, his eyes sparking fire. Then he told me the story of his life.
I was born 65 years ago in Tynemouth Creek, New Brunswick, a place of about 3 houses and a water tank.
Painless Parker was actually born as Edgar Randolph Parker. He was the son of a wealthy shipbuilder, and he'd grown up in a mansion. He went to the nearby small seaside town of St. Martin's, where he had been a distinctly uninspired student. His concerned parents sent him away to Horton Collegiate Academy, which was an exclusive private school in Wolfville in Nova Scotia. He later claimed that he hated the boarding school so much that he faked a fit of madness in order to get sent home. Others suggested, though, that he'd simply actually failed out of school. Either way, he was sent back to New Brunswick, where his parents tried to make him become a church minister. They sent him to the Baptist Union Seminary School in St. Martin's, where after only 6 months, he was expelled for bad behavior. By this point, Edgar Parker is 16 years old, and he goes to Moncton, where he decides to become a peddler. He got a rickety old wagon and an elderly horse, and he went door to door on rural farms in the region, selling everything from tobacco to tablewares, from sewing kits to soup pots, from teas to toys and almanacs. But when his wealthy shipbuilder father found out that his son was a door-to-door peddler, he was distinctly unimpressed. He made Edgar Parker quit peddling and go to St. John, where he would get
what father called a promotion, what mother called a situation, and what I called a job. I was taken on by a St. John firm. My first day, I was busy storing glass that came by vessel to one of the wharves. In the middle of my work, one of the firms spoke to me. "I suppose you'd like to know what your pay will be, my boy," said he. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Well," he went on, "the lad we had last was paid $1 a week. We're going to give you $1.50.
Now, while we all know that money changes value over time, it doesn't change that much. $1.50 back in the 1890s would be worth, in today's money, something like $55 a week.
And with visions of board to pay and shoes to buy and this and that, I looked at him with open mouth, staring eyes, dropped the glass I was carrying, smashed it, said something uncomplimentary, and left the store. Later, I boarded a vessel that was about to sail, and I've been pretty much all over this continent ever since.
He was gone a year on that ship. When he returned, the main lesson he learned was that he did not want to be a sailor. At this point, his increasingly exasperated parents had about enough of their wayward son's unfocused ways, so they sent him away to New York City for his wealthy uncle who lived there to deal with. This wealthy uncle quickly decided that he had no idea what to do with this nephew who had come to live with him, so he decided to seek the assistance of a professional. So do you remember back when you were in high school, just as you were about to graduate, they would have you fill out these questionnaire things that teachers and guidance counselors would have you do, where they ask you all about your passions and interests, and then they try and present you with a long list of potential career paths that you might find compelling to try and help you to find a job path in life. Well, back in the 1890s, they definitely didn't have anything like that. What they did have back then was called a phrenologist. And that was what young Edgar Parker was sent to. So in order to offer young people career advice, a phrenologist would take a set of forceps and calipers, which basically means giant clamp things that are used to measure things, and they would put these on the heads of kids who needed career advice, and they would measure their heads. We're not talking about measuring brain waves or anything fancy like that. We're talking literally a measuring stick that is measuring the size of their heads. So then, based on the size and the shape of the kid's head, they would recommend a career path for them. So this now 18-year-old Edgar Parker went to a phrenologist in New York City named Fowler, and Fowler the phrenologist measured his head, and he told him that he should be a dentist. Entirely based on this recommendation from Fowler the phrenologist's measurement of his head, the teenage Edgar Parker enrolled in the New York College of Dentistry. After only one term in that school, which even back then was definitely not long enough to get a degree or become an accredited dentist, the 18-year-old student, Edgar Parker, started going door to door offering dental services to people for cash.
While the other boys were out studying, I was out getting enough to eat. Via door-to-door dentistry, I carried my tools with me. I'd put my foot in the door and give a spiel patterned after the one I gave as a peddler.
Before the end of his first year of dental school, using his uncle's money, he opened his own dentist office in Manhattan. So a lot of the medical stuff in this story is going to sound impossibly alien to people today. I mean, we just talked about a head-measuring career advisor. But one thing that's definitely not changed between 1891 and today is that a student who hasn't even finished 1 year of dental school opening a dentist office is definitely not allowed. So when his college found out that he'd opened his own dental office, Edgar Parker was expelled from dental school. Completely undeterred by this setback, he enrolled in a new dental school, the Philadelphia Dental College. In the end, he barely graduated. It sounded like he was actually on the cusp of failing out, but he talked the dean into letting him stay. But in the end, he did graduate. And now, armed with his degree, he went back home to St. Martin's, New Brunswick, to become a dentist. And there he very quickly learned that people didn't like going to the dentist. Simply put, people were scared of the dentist because going to the dentist hurt. And so, Edgar Parker, working in conjunction with a local pharmacist in St. Martin's, developed what would soon become his much talked about, highly hyped, top secret, patented method of making dental work pain-free. Allegedly. You know what? I actually spent an awful lot of time and an awful lot of research trying to figure out what exactly was the secret of his patented painless dentistry medicine. He gave it a fancy name and he was really mysterious about it. It was like a big trade secret. I wasted a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what it was. The answer should have been pretty obvious. I mean, this is the 1890s we're talking about and it's something medical related. Can you guess what it is? That's right. It was cocaine. It was just straight up cocaine. That was just it. It wasn't even something fancy. He was mixing cocaine with water and he would inject it into people's gums. Or it's not actually super clear. It sounded like he may have been injecting it straight into the cavity itself. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that's not how that works. Yeah, you're right, it's not. But so, remember the Dr. Leslie E. Keeley Gold Cure episode where we went into all this detail about the nature of and medical science behind alcoholism and its cures in this nuanced and balanced way? Well, that's not this episode. The thing about Parker's famous, allegedly painless dental work was that his secret solution sounds, at least if you're uninformed or you don't think too much about it, it sounds like it could work. And that kind of thing can be marketed. Something sounding like it could work's been the basis for many a business empire. And that is exactly what's happening here. Edgar Parker took his big idea and his patented, allegedly painless dental medicine on the road, and he went back to Moncton again. There he opened a dental parlor, and that's what a dentist office was called back then. He didn't actually do any of the legal requirement to open his dental parlor. He just rented out the back of a Moncton barber shop, and he had one chair there, and he just started pulling out teeth.
A local dentist objected to his system of pulling teeth, and Parker found his native province had passed a law to prevent unregistered dentists from practicing.
The fine for practicing without a license was $200 a day, and I didn't have the money. So I went to jail. But I got back at that fellow who complained.
Parker said he made a triumphant comeback. He brought a band with him and a stage show, and put on a little circus outside the office of the dentist who had registered the objection.
And the crowd saw me pull out teeth that other fellow had broken off.
The dental circus protest in Moncton, outside his rival dentist's office, became the blueprint for what would make him famous and wealthy. Soon, Edgar Parker took his dental wagon on the road. He would pull out teeth right there in the open, on the bed of his dental wagon, which he made into a stage, apparently really leaning into the theatrics of it. On it, he would have a gas lamp for light, and he'd have a coronet, and that's a type of a horn, which he'd either talk through like a loudspeaker or he'd blow on to lure in more patients. And while doing this with the coronet, he would be pulling out teeth one-handed. Some said that he would be using that loudspeaker to drown out the screams of the patients, because his dentistry wasn't necessarily actually always painless. He toured New Brunswick this way, on the back of a horse-drawn wagon, until the autumn of 1898, and then he moved back to New York City, and there he opened another little dentist parlor in Brooklyn. And that's when he made it big. He made it big not because of his own practice, but because of the advice that he received from, of all unexpected places, his landlord. I also get advice from my landlady. Sometimes she will slip notes under my door telling me that there's a sale at such and such a store on sweaters and winter coats. See, my heat is included in my rent. But young Edgar Parker's landlord was very different and had a very different background and had some very different advice. His landlord was named William Beebe, and he had worked closely with P.T. Barnum, who was the subject of the recent movie The Greatest Showman. And this landlord had learned a thing or two about show business and about how to market a business.
William Beebe. A blue-eyed 6-footer tipped the scales at nearly 300 pounds. Beebe wore a mustache, combed his blonde hair in a pompadour. He continually and nervously chomped on a long black cigar. Beebe had been in the circus business for 45 of his 60 years. He had done nearly everything in the P.T. Barnum Big Top. Fed the animals, played the trombone, sold peanuts, been a sideshow barker.
William Beebe's suggestion to this young dentist was to advertise. But not any normal ads, though. He wanted him to use the P.T. Barnum School of Advertising. He told the young dentist,
"Never do anything by half measure."
He said advertising should never, under any circumstances, be ordinary. It had to make people stop and look and listen. And he had to do so much advertising that it would absolutely inundate the public. William Beebe encouraged Parker to think like P.T. Barnum and do something so outrageous that people would sit up and take notice. William Beebe's first suggestion was a really strange mix of dental education mixed with advertising. Beebe had Parker memorize a 35-minute long speech on how to keep your teeth healthy. And then he had him ride around in a wagon playing a slide trombone to get people's attention. Then Parker would deliver his 35-minute long speech on how to keep your teeth healthy in the style of a circus barker. And then he would offer to people in the audience whose teeth were long beyond being helped by routine dental care to get their teeth pulled right there in front of everyone on the back of this wagon for the very reasonable price of 50 cents per tooth. So kids, if you're ever wondering what people did for fun before the internet, there you go. The moment that would specifically give the rise to Painless Parker began with a debate between William Beebe and Edgar Parker over what kind of a sign should be advertising their shop. The still young Edgar Randolph Parker wanted to have a very calm, low-key, pleasant, and respectable sign for his shop, and it would read simply, Edgar R. Parker, comma, dentist. Pretty simple. William Beebe, on the other hand, wanted him to go bigger. In the end, the two of them agreed to go with William Beebe's idea for a sign. So up went a 10-foot high and 110 feet long sign, which read,
Painless Parker, preeminent, par excellent, positively painless perfection of practice, and philanthropically predisposed to popular prices.
And so, in a flurry of alliteration, Painless Parker was born. Now, the only person who is possibly a bigger fan of alliteration, says the Backyard History podcast producer, Jordan Lozier. So just for Jordan, we're going to slide in another one of the Painless Parker's many alliterative advertisements. My favorite one is proclaimed by public, press, and pulpit. Painless Parker is positively perfect. Try saying that 10 times fast. This so-called quote-unquote painless branding got him slapped with a lawsuit alleging his dental work was distinctly, in fact, not painless. So in order to get around this, he officially changed his name. The young reporter Ralph Morton asked him about that, writing,
He was born Edgar Randolph Parker. Painless Parker is his legitimate name today. The genial little New Brunswicker explained why. 2 years after his band incident in Moncton, he started yanking molars in Brooklyn, New York. There were 12 dentists there by the name Parker. He therefore distinguished himself by using the nomenclature Painless Parker.
With William Beebe's advertising help, Painless Parker quickly became wealthy and famous. Only 2 years after he first met William Beebe, Painless Parker owned 17 different dentist offices, pulling in gross revenues of well over $1 million a year, which was an absolutely staggering sum of money for that time. He also took his tooth-pulling tour on the road, and he created the Painless Parker Dental Circus, and he'd have full bands playing as he pulled teeth. He claimed to have personally pulled out 357 teeth by himself in one day. And he was so proud of this personal best record that he took out those 357 teeth he pulled in one day and he put them on a necklace, which he would wear around his neck while wearing a big top hat. And he would do all sorts of publicity stunts like that, like, for example, sticking his head into the mouth of a full-sized live hippopotamus to fix a cavity. From there, his success and his wealth only grew. In 1904, at the age of only 32 years old, he came back home to New Brunswick for a visit. A reporter for the Daily Telegraph newspaper caught up with him and wrote,
"He is now the owner of $150,000 worth of property in New York and a large block of buildings in Brooklyn. He does hundreds of dollars worth of dentistry a month. Dr. Parker has recently purchased a handsome touring car at a cost of $5,000.
So you might be wondering at this point, was what this guy doing actually good or bad? Should we be rooting for this rogue dentist or not? Even today, a century later, fierce debate over what his career actually meant and the significance of what he did still rages on in academic circles. There's two different ways of viewing his career and his legacy, and they really could not be much different one from the other.
When the American Dental Association called Painless Parker a menace to the dignity of the profession, they were right. There was nothing special about him. A 1910 New York Times expose claimed there were 3,000 so-called dentists ruining the mouths of the poor and immigrants in New York and leaving them in worse shape than they came in.
Painless Parker was operating at a time when professional licensing was first becoming a thing. Before that, you didn't need to go to a school to become a dentist. You apprenticed and learned from other dentists. Many dentists who had practiced for years were outlawed, and the cost of dental work went up so much that working people couldn't afford to get their teeth fixed.
Painless Parker roamed neighborhoods with forceps, pulling out teeth while accompanied by brass bands and dancing girls.
The circuses were to meet the poor, working-class public where they were. Few people want to go to a lecture on how to keep your teeth clean, but lots of people want to go see a circus. If they happen to learn how to care for their teeth at that circus, then all the better.
Rival dentists charged he would do completely unacceptable treatments like putting crowns on teeth before killing the nerve. Others alleged he substituted gold for brass in bridge work. Then there were the lawsuits. He seems to have been sued for $900,000 over the 10 years he operated in Brooklyn.
Painless Parker proudly bragged that he brought the cost of dental work within reach of the masses. The way he was able to do this, though, was by volume. He and his offices were performing vast amounts of dental work quickly to get more people through and make more money to justify his lower prices.
Painless Parker's legacy is ethics. His ethics were so bad that dental associations not only in Canada and the United States, but all over the world instituted new professional ethical standards to make sure that nothing like Painless Parker ever happened again.
Teeth aren't luxury bones. Dental health is closely related to other health outcomes, including heart health. Leaving rotten teeth in your mouth can literally kill you. Painless Parker's legacy was how he used advertising to educate people on how to care for your teeth, which he paid for out of his own pocket.
This debate continues to rage on even today in academic journals without much of a consensus. As for Painless Parker himself, his New York dental empire came crashing down less than a decade after it began. In 1902, William Beebe died of a massive heart attack. Shortly after that, at the age of only 34 years old, Painless Parker had a nervous breakdown, and he had to be sent to an asylum. He recovered, though, and he was released. And then he sold off his businesses for a reported profit of $3 million. That's a huge sum of money back then. That's like well over $100 million in today's money. And then he moved to the American West Coast and he retired. But not for long. When the reporter asked him about this brief retirement, Painless Parker retorted,
Retire? Why, my life has been half battle and half play, and I have enjoyed overcoming a lot of opposition. And another thing, I've liked it. And if one likes it, it becomes play. And I'm happy to say that has been my experience.
And so Painless Parker started again. from scratch on the American West Coast, and he did it all again. He began a new and even more successful chain of dental offices. He started brand new, bigger dental circuses, which had everything from acrobats and trapeze artists and animal menageries and clowns. And he even had a whole new, bigger bunch of lawsuits launched against him, as well as having his dentist license revoked in several states. He blamed all of this on a conspiracy by dental associations. The lawsuit that he was angrily phoning this young reporter named Ralph Morton about seems to have been a direct attack targeting his name.
New York State passed a law requiring all dentists to practice under their correct names. It was a direct blow at his painless caption, Parker contended.
There's some way to beat that.
He mused.
I am not ashamed of my name, Painless Parker. And if anybody believed I would abolish it and would be forced to lose my business, they are greatly mistaken. I'd rather part my name in the middle than on two sides anyway. And I lost Edgar Randolph without regrets. Everybody knows me as Painless, and painless I shall be.
He ultimately went on to win that lawsuit. And he just kept on winning, right up until when he died in 1952 at the age of 80 years old. At the time of his death, Painless Parker owned dozens of dental offices all over America, and he employed a staggering 800 dentists. Only 6 weeks after his death, though, his vast dental empire was completely dismantled by regulators working with the California Dental Association. By the time all the lawsuits were finally settled, there was virtually no inheritance left for his kids. But possibly out of his whole story, the craziest plot twist involves his son. See, Painless Parker had 2 kids. He was close with his daughter, but unfortunately she died young in a car accident. This left only his son, who he was, shall we say, not very close to. I'm not sure why they had a falling out, but if I chose to speculate, it may have something to do with what he chose to name his son, which was Painless Parker Jr. The son actually grew up to become a dentist, but he was not involved with his father's dental empire, and in fact he was the exact opposite kind of dentist. He was a normal dentist. He did not follow in his father's footsteps. He went the opposite way in life. Much like how his father before him had changed his name, his son, Painless Parker Jr., also changed his name to Edgar Parker. The son loathed the way his father practiced dentistry, and he was actually one of the leading figures in the California Dental Association when it successfully shut down his father's empire only weeks after Painless Parker's death.
That was Backyard History with your host, Andrew McLean. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for another hidden story that happened in your own backyard.
Painless Parker, voiced by Jordan Batstone.
Ethics debater, voiced by Shauna Chase.
Ian Slanders and the reporter for the Daily Telegraph, voiced by Kaylin Fraser.
Produced by Jordan Lozier.